Ciao and welcome back. Are you ready for our last installment of Q&A with Ludovica? Before we jump in, I want to take a moment to thank you all for watching my previous video and for sharing it. And thanks so much for the positive comments and the questions you asked me. And for those of you who missed the previous video, here's a quick recap of what we talked about. The importance of practicing and having conversations with yourself or with others, how to memorize new words and expressions in an easy and fun way, and how to use the language or languages that you already speak to your advantage. If you're watching this on YouTube and you're interested in going back and catching up on the previous episode, just click on the link that will appear above here in a mere moment. Before we jump into today's Q&A session, I just want to encourage you to stick till the end because I will be talking about something very exciting that I just prepared. So stay tuned. Let's focus on today's episode now. What are we going to cover in this Q&A session? Among other things, we'll talk about masculine and feminine nouns, articles, the subjunctive, formal and informal speech, reflexive verbs, and the Italian sentence construction. Also, today is the day where I finally tell you everything about my S.O.A.P method. Are you ready? Talking about masculine and feminine, you might have noticed that Italian is one of those languages. Yes, one of those languages that assign gender seemingly arbitrarily to things. So not just to people, but to things too. For example, the thing I have behind me here is a couch. Divano in Italian is masculine, il divano, while chair, sedia, right? So we're still talking about something that you sit on, but chair, sedia, la sedia, is feminine. So gender assignment is kind of arbitrary in that sense. I can think of whole categories of things such as fruits and vegetables, for example. Well, they should have logically all one gender. Let's just pick one and say that all fruits are feminine, right? No, it does not work that way. So you can find la mela, l'arancia, la pera, la banana, l'uva, all feminine. But then you also have il kiwi, il caco. So you see how the gender assignment is a bit arbitrary. You cannot make a distinction based on what we're talking about or the mental category in which you will put a certain thing. What will help though is to become aware of the fact that certain groups of words have the same gender. For example, the words ending in ione in Italian, such as televisione, opinione, concentrazione, stazione. Those are all feminine. This will help you a lot because, as we've seen in the previous episode, there are so many ION words in English, right? Opinion, television, and those are exactly the same in Italian. We'll just end the final E. So opinion, opinione, television, televisione, all those are feminine. There you have it. There are other categories that behave in the same way. The fact that in Italian we distinguish between masculine and feminine makes for articles to be way more complicated than they are in English. Well, in English you only have one, the, T-H-E. The apple, the apples. The couch, the beds, the furniture is always T-H-E. It doesn't really matter if you're talking about something that is singular or plural, nor masculine or feminine, because that distinction does not exist in English. In Italian, though, we have masculine, feminine, singular, plural, so already 4 distinctions, plus the complications of those masculine nouns start with a vowel, so we don't use il, but we use lo, a different type of article. In totality, we have 6 different articles in Italian. Il, lo, la, I, gli, le. I should have done this. 6 total. Il, lo, la, the singular. I, gli, le, the plural forms. I can give you the rules because there are rules. I can tell you we use this in this situation, etc. and etc. In my opinion, once more, it's kind of boring to learn grammar this way. Why don't you become an article detective? Why don't you start observing what's going on around you? If you're reading a book, you'll find plenty of articles. So just pay attention. If you see gli spaghetti over and over again, then you will know, you will associate spaghetti with gli. You don't even have to think about it when you have to use spaghetti in a sentence. And trust me, you will need to use it a lot. No, just kidding. By becoming grammar detectives, so to speak, you start collecting hints, bits and pieces of future conversations that you will have. You just start collecting nouns and articles so far. And maybe by collecting nouns and articles, then you move into finding a third word in there, sometimes sandwiched in between the article and noun, that agrees in terms of gender and number. So let me take a step back now and let's forget for a second about grammatical terminology. Let's imagine that you are reading a short story in Italian and you see il gatto here, il gatto there. Well, you start associating il gatto, the cat. So you become familiar with that il, which is what we call article in grammar, and gatto, the noun, il gatto. And then at some point, you will read il mio gatto. Oh, okay, now you have an additional word there, il mio gatto. In grammar, we talk about mio as a possessive. It's an adjective and indicates possession. So who possesses that cat? It's me, right? Il mio gatto, my cat. Now you start seeing three words that all agree in gender and number. Il mio gatto, they're all masculine singular. Once more, start observing, just paying attention to what's going on, and then little by little you will absorb those elements so that you don't have to pay conscious attention every time you want to say my cat. After a while, il mio gatto, you have it. You saw it so many times, you repeated it so many times, that is not something that you learn by heart, but it's something that belongs to you at that point. It's an unconscious reflex. I am recommending you to go this way about focusing on perfecting the gender and number agreement. So matching, so to speak, the article, the adjectives, and the noun, because it's a more natural way. And it will probably put you under less stress. It is one of the most difficult things, one of the things that even advanced speakers mess up with the most. Especially when we get to adjectives that do not behave in a traditional way, so they do not have the o or a ending if they're masculine or feminine, but they have maybe the e ending for both masculine and feminine when they're singular, and then the e ending spelled with the letter I when we're talking about plural. So that can create a bit of confusion. But if you absorb these elements from what you're reading, from what you're listening to, for example, then they will just become part of your vocabulary, part of your arsenal. So it will be easier to go about it that way. Of course, as I said multiple times, I don't want you to learn these things by heart. I want you to understand them. So don't rely on your memory, rely on your understanding. That's absolutely essential. Let me just give you an example based on context, something that I'm wearing today. This in Italian it's called maglia. So you see how it has long sleeves. So it's not a maglietta. Maglietta will be a t-shirt. This is a maglia with long sleeves. And it has nothing to do with maglione, which is a sweater. I know in Italian we have like three kind of similar words. Maglietta, maglia, maglione, the warm and puffy one. So what I'm wearing today is a maglia. Can you guess the gender? Maglia, it ends with a. It is a feminine word. La maglia. La mia maglia è rosa. La mia maglia è rosa. So my long sleeve shirt, actually my long sleeve shirt, la mia maglia è rosa, is pink. You see how everything that needs to create accordance based on gender and number, in this case, ends in a. La, mia, maglia, rosa. This is easy. This is an easy instance where you're just matching the endings and you're good to go. There are some adjectives, though, as I mentioned before, that will not end in a traditional way, in the way that you would expect. For example, sottile. Sottile is thin. thin. You see how, oh, sorry, like covering. You see how this is not thick, so is sottile. La mia maglia è sottile. Now you see how sottile is that adjective that does not change the ending if we're talking about something masculine or feminine. It's still sottile, as long as we're talking about one thing. Hence, la mia maglia è sottile is a perfect sentence. Everything grammatically works, but you're not matching the endings of those words. La mia maglia, they will end in a. Sottile ends in e, spelled with a letter e. E. So oftentimes playing the matching game does not work. A lot of people do not really understand what's going on. Hence, my pushing you to understand and really try to have clear in mind what's going on so that you don't fall into the matching trap. Let's talk about the verbs essere and avere. Essere means to be and avere means to have. Those are essential verbs, like in any language, essere and avere. Why am I bringing them up? Well, first of all, they're a bit irregular, especially the verb essere, that one likes to do its own thing. And then they are often used in a different way compared to how English speakers would use them. And I'll give you an example right away. If in English I say, I'm hungry, I am hungry, I'm using the verb to be. In Italian, though, I say ho fame. Ho comes from the verb avere. So I have hunger. You see how the expression is not the same? I'm not going to say sono. I cannot translate I am hungry with sono. Ho fame. Same thing with thirst, right? If you're thirsty, in Italian you say I have thirst. If you're sleepy, you would say I have sleepiness. Ho sonno. Ho fame, ho sete, ho sonno. These are all instances of very, very common sentences that you will find every day and you might need to use every day, where the verbs to be and to have in English do not really translate exactly in the same way in the Italian expressions. So what am I recommending here? I am suggesting that you use the power of your observation and your understanding. Once more, do not learn those things by heart, but try and get into the language, try and understand it better and dissect it a bit, in a sense. What I'm encouraging you to do is to apply my S.O.A.P method. Now, what does S.O.A.P mean? Or, well, what does it stand for? The S stands for slow down. Sometimes we're just, rushing ahead and we get all frantic. Oh my God, I don't understand. Slow down. So S.O.A.P, slow down, observe. Observe, I've talked about this a lot. The power of observation is the first thing. What do you see? After you slow down, you can finally see. What do you see? So slow down, observe, alter. So whatever you observe, then once you understand how it works, you can alter it. And practice. Practice. Yeah, the P is essential in S.O.A.P. Okay, let me give you an example. Let's assume that you're reading a fairy tale in Italian. The fairy tale starts with c'era una volta, tanto tempo fa, etc., right? Etc. You do not understand a thing or barely. You're wondering what's going on. Don't panic. Slow down. C'era una volta. It's the beginning of a fairy tale. What could that be? Most likely means once upon a time, and it actually does. So by slowing down, by using your logic, you can already infer and understand the meaning of this sentence, c'era una volta, just based on logic, right? But why am I using the verb to be? Era is the imperfecto of essere, so it was. C'era, there was. Oh, there was one time. Okay, kind of makes sense. Once upon a time, there was one time. So now you slow down, you observed, kind of, chunking it up, analyzing it a bit. You observe what's going on, the specific expression. Now you can alter it. Now that you understand it, you can modify it. What are you going to do with C'era una volta. Well, maybe you will never use the full expression unless you're telling a story. Most likely you're not going to walk around saying c'era una volta as you're traveling. But you can take c'era, there was, and use it to talk about the weather. Oh, c'era bel tempo ieri. There was beautiful weather yesterday. C'era bel tempo. Maybe you, at this point, since you know what c'era means, you can answer the question, c'era il sole l'altro ieri? C'era il sole l'altro ieri? Was there, this is a question, so instead of there is, was there the sun the day before yesterday? So was it sunny the day before yesterday? You see how after you slow down, you observe what was going on, you basically extrapolated that c'era chunk, and now you're using it, you're altering the context in which c'era was found originally, and you're using it to create your own sentences. Once you do, then you need to practice with yourself, with a language partner, with people in the street. So that's the base of the S.O.A.P method. Slow down, observe, alter, practice, rinse and repeat. I would recommend you to use the S.O.A.P method when you are dealing with the past tense in Italian. I mean, you can use it whenever you want. It's a great method. But if you already know how to form the past tense, or several, right, past tenses in Italian, you know how to form the passato prossimo, ho mangiato, ho dormito, sono andata, and you know how to form the imperfetto, mangiavo, guardavo, facevo, dormivo, etc. Okay, so you know how to form it. Let's assume that you're at this stage, but you don't know exactly when to use them and how to distinguish which one should I use when. The S.O.A.P method is great because the premise is that you're going to observe those type of past in their own environment. So you're going to be reading or listening or, hearing people talking, just paying attention. Not necessarily learning the rule by heart. And then little by little, you'll start noticing how, for example, the imperfetto is used a lot to talk about the weather, to describe things and situations in the past. C'era il sole ieri, faceva molto freddo, mentre dormivi, so now we're not talking about the weather anymore, mentre dormivi, io sono andata in palestra. Mentre dormivi, sono andata in palestra. Now we're using both past tenses. Well, mentre dormivi, if you know what mentre means, right, while. Dormivi, now you can translate that imperfetto with was or were plus the ing form, the ing form, while you were sleeping, mentre dormivi. Mentre mangiavo, while I was eating. And then for the second chunk of the sentence, sono andata in palestra, I went to the gym. Well, you see how observation is absolutely the starting point for everything. You might have observed what is called congiuntivo, the subjunctive, used a lot in Italian, because it gives a different nuance to the spoken language and the written language too. So if I say, è bello, it is beautiful. Right? I'm seeing something and I'm saying è bello. This is a statement, it is beautiful. But if I say I think that it is beautiful, in Italian I would say penso che sia bello. So I'm not saying è anymore, I'm using sia, which is a subjunctive form of that verb, essere. Penso che sia bello. Why do I need to change verb there? Because I'm saying it's my opinion. Okay, so I'm giving you that hint that it's not an objective truth. This is my opinion. Penso che sia bello. And as we like to say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? So oftentimes we use that subjunctive really to mark the distinction between what is subjective, right? Subjunctive, subjective. What is subjective and what is not. Every time you express emotions, hopes, fears, thoughts, opinions, then you get into the more subjective area. I like to call it Conjunctivolandia. It's like opening a door to a new world, a new land, the land of Conjuntivo. hence Conjunctivolandia. Sometimes with my clients I say, every time they start a sentence, penso che non sono convinto che, attenzione, Conjunctivolandia, right? Are you about to enter Conjunctivolandia? Since English does not really have the subjunctive, actually, yeah, there is a subjunctive if you think about if I were you. If I were you, that's a subjunctive, but it is not very used. You only have like one form and that's it. So since in English the concept of the subjunctive is not so rich, I would recommend at the beginning to only focus on two forms, on two tenses of the subjunctive in Italian, because the Italian language has four actually, but let's only focus on two. Presente e imperfetto. So the present subjunctive will be mangi, beva, dorma, pensi, etc. See? In the case of the verb essere and avere, because I told you guys how these are a bit, different from the rest, sia is the present subjunctive of essere and abbia, the present subjunctive of avere. I'm only giving you the first three persons, so io, tu, and lui, lei, because in the present subjunctive, that's the beauty, you learn one form for them all. So every time a singular person is the subject, with the subjunctive, you're just good to go. You only have one form. Penso che sia could mean I think that I am, I think that you are, I think that he is, I think that she is, I think that it is. Yeah, there you go, sia. So this is the present subjunctive. When it comes to the imperfetto, congiuntivo imperfetto, in a sentence such as if I were you, the English if I were you corresponds to se fossi in te, se fossi in te. So fossi is still the verb essere in this congiuntivo imperfetto. The congiuntivo imperfetto is easily distinguishable from anything else because it has a double S. So fossi will be from the verb essere, avessi from the verb avere, mangiassi from the verb mangiare, dormissi, etc. Right? You get the gist. So it is not really that difficult to form. Of course, once more, I'm only giving you the first persons. You can, look up or encounter all the other persons and have fun with it. But this is just to give you an idea, to prime you not to hate the subjunctive, because it's not that difficult to form. Another thing that the Italian language has and the English language does not is the distinction between formal and informal. In English, you only say you. Hey, how are you? I could say to you if I just met you or if we are all old friends. How are you? It will not change. In Italiano, we do make a distinction between the tu, which is the informal, and the lei person. So every time we want to be polite, we want to address someone formally, we are actually addressing that person using the she, lei. Yeah. Don't ask me why we picked that specific person. I have no idea, to be honest. But the verb needs to be at the she person, such as in come sta oggi, sta, S-T-A. That's it. That's a he or she form. Come sta? And if I'm looking straight at you in the eye, we don't know each other, right? And I say come sta, I'm talking to you. There is no one behind you, right? I'm not talking about someone else. Come sta oggi? I'm looking at you in the eyes, so even if I'm using the he or she form, that's just because I'm being polite. Why do we do it exactly, and when do we do it? As I said, we want to be polite. We are waiting for the other person, usually the older person, or the person that has more power. In a sense, but we're waiting for the older person to give us permission to be informal. Hence, when we're past the age of 10, we are taught to, start talking in this formal way to people, to adults, to people that are older, to strangers. Sometimes it gets to the point that it's almost weird. People my age, I'm in my mid-30s, so if I meet someone else in Italy, same age, I still kind of use the formal way, even if it's a bit, weird, because I cannot assume that that person wants to be super friendly right away. So we will start using the she form, and then at some point we will look at each other and maybe say diamoci del tu, diamoci del tu. Diamoci, diamo is give, or let's give, right? It's a we person. Diamoci, so let's give each other del tu, so some tu form, tu, because that's going to be the informal way of addressing one another. Diamoci del tu. Another thing that puzzles a bit, especially English speakers, are those reflexive verbs. There are so many in Italian, and it's funny because I'm noticing how many reflexive verbs are used more and more often now these days, now that I'm working with clients, because they're bringing it up, like, oh, what does this mean? And I am just so shocked that, once more we are using a reflexive verb. First of all, what are reflexive verbs? Reflexive verbs are verbs where the subject and the object just coincide. It's the same person. So let's take the verb guardare, to look at or to watch. If I say guardo Maria, I look at Maria. So I am the subject, Maria is the object, is not the same person, right? So we have that straight line kind of. I look at Maria. At least I visualize it that way. But if I say that I look at myself, mi guardo, so I look at myself, that line is kind of circling back. It's folding over itself. So the subject and the object are actually the same person. Mi guardo, I look at myself. Mi guardo allo specchio, for example. I look at myself in a mirror when I put on makeup. Otherwise, I would look like a clown. So as I was saying, there are the obvious reflexive ones, and then there are some others that are not that obvious. And I kind of want to hint at those for a second. One of my clients recently, he's reading L'amica geniale, My Brilliant Friend. That's the title in English. So he's reading My Brilliant Friend, which is a complex reading. So kudos to him. And one day he comes to me and says, I don't really understand this sentence. And he reads it. And it was so obvious and easy for me, but there was a reflexive verb. The verb leggere, to read, used in a reflexive way that you wouldn't expect, because you're never going to read yourself, right? So the sentence went, si era letta molti libri, something like that. So, si era letta basically means she read to herself, she read for herself, for her own enjoyment. Instead of saying aveva letto molti libri, si era letta molti libri. What is the difference between leggere and leggersi? Is the sense of enjoyment. So if I say ho letto un libro ieri sera, perfetto, yeah, that's just a statement. I read a book last night. But if I say mi sono letta un libro ieri sera, now you understand, just by the way I'm phrasing it, that I really enjoyed it. Mi sono letta un libro. Maybe you can picture me, getting cozy on the couch and really enjoying the experience. So that's the difference. Oftentimes we use regular verbs in a reflexive way to add that sense of enjoyment. Once more, don't stress out, observe. Use the S.O.A.P method in this case too. Really observe, try and understand what's going on based on context, and you will be able to pick all these reflexive verbs up and learn how to use them in context correctly, mainly by observing how they're already used. Another point that quite a few people raised is the fact that the order of the elements in the Italian sentence does not make sense. It's just so different from English. I heard this quite a lot, and to be honest, I kind of disagree. I'm going to explain why. English and Italian both belong to the same big family of SVO languages. SVO stands for subject, verb, object. So in both languages, we use the subject before the verb and the verb before the object, right? So that's going to be the order. For example, I eat an apple. There you go. I, subject, eat, verb, object will be the apple. Same thing in Italian, mangio una mela, or io mangio una mela, when we decide to express the subject. So the order is the same. Hence, the majority of sentences in English and in Italian will have a common grammatical structure. There are 4 instances where the structure is going to be different. Questions, because in Italian you don't have to do anything else but change the intonation. Sei felice? This is a statement, you are happy. Sei felice? Are you happy? You see how I didn't really change the order? Sei felice, statement. Sei felice? I just go up with intonation and there you have it, the question. The placement of adjectives usually happens after the noun, while in English it's always before. So for example, ti piace la mia maglia rosa? Ti piace, do you like, la mia maglia rosa? My pink shirt. So you see how I'm putting rosa afterwards. The placement of pronouns is a bit different. So usually in Italian we put pronouns before the verb. Lo mangio spesso. I eat it often. But in Italian we're saying it, I eat often. Lo mangio spesso. La vedo sempre. I always see her. La vedo sempre. Her, I see, always. And then sometimes, well, we don't need to express the subject in Italian, but sometimes we do. We choose to. And at that point, it's usually at the end of the sentence or in a different position compared to where you would expect it to be, because we want to give it more emphasis. Since it is a choice for us to express it, then we're giving it more emphasis by putting it in a, awkward position, not awkward, but just a position that is not necessarily the natural one. So if I say, com'è andata la settimana? Com'è andata la settimana? How did it go? The week. So the week is the subject. In English you would say, how did the week go? But I'm putting it at the end of the sentence to create, that sense of emphasis. Because I could just simply say, com'è andata? How did it go? If it's clear that we're talking about the week. Or maybe I want to say, I'll do it. Lo faccio io. Lo faccio io. It, I do, I, right? So I'm expressing that I at the end of the sentence to attract the, attention. Lo faccio io, yeah? Don't worry, I'll do it. All this is to say that I will rather focus on the similarities between the 2 languages than the differences, because what you focus on becomes your reality. And I'm going to repeat it one more time. What you focus on becomes your reality. In this specific case, when we're talking about Italian grammar, if you say, well, the Italian grammar doesn't make sense, the sentence structure is completely different, well, guess what? You're going to find all of those proofs that it is exactly as you're thinking. Well, there is no doubt that there are some differences because the 2 languages are 2 different languages. Focus on the similarities so that you will reinforce that concept that you already have way more because you speak English, right? So you have way more knowledge that you can use and apply to Italian than you think. Once you suspend the judgment, that what happens is that you become more open and receptive to observing the patterns in the language. So you will become open to absorbing all of these elements more naturally because you're not pushing them away, you're not rejecting them, you're not judging them. And, well, observation is the base or one of the core principles of the S.O.A.P method. Try it. It will help you a lot. Also, reframing the way that we see certain grammatical aspects will make them more friendly, more approachable. Let me give you an example. I created this concept of the 6 cousins that applies to the most common irregular verbs. I just don't like to call them irregular because then they feel bad. No, it's just that to say that they're irregular, they kind of become unfriendly in a way, but to see them as a group of verbs that just, do their own thing, they're a bit different, but they're happily doing their own thing, they become more approachable. So who are these 6 cousins? Dare, fare, stare, and then andare, avere, and sapere. They behave in a similar way, right? They're cousins, so they have their own thing going on. Let's only look at the tu person and the loro person. So the you singular and they. 2, all these verbs will end in I, not the letter I, the sound I. Dai, fai, vai, sai, etc. They all end in the same way. And the loro person will end in N and O. So stanno, hanno, fanno, vanno. There you go. Are those so unfriendly now? All right, let's recap what we've done here throughout those 3 Q&A sessions, because we've been raising very good points, together. We talked about creating the right learning environment, and we talked about applying what you learned right away. We talked about finding people that you can practice with, focusing on what really matters, reframing the way you think about Italian grammar, using the language or languages that you already speak to help you acquire Italian, and lastly, applying the S.O.A.P method. All of these elements that I just mentioned will be essential components of a new exciting offer that I just put together. It's going to be a limited offer, and it will definitely help you bring your Italian to the next level. Since only a small number of people will be able to take advantage of this offer, and since I will not be talking about it on YouTube, make sure that I have your email address. The way you can contact me is by sending a very quick email, even just a one-liner, to info@languagecoachnyc.com. info@languagecoachnyc.com. Once I have your email address, I will make sure that you will receive a message with a link to the video where I will explain everything about this new offer. As usual, feel free to leave a comment or ask any questions you might have, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all next time. Ciao, a presto!